6 things you should unlearn from your driving test. The traditional driving test is an archaic system that's desperately in need of an update. So with that in mind, here are 6 driving test techniques you should forget as soon as you get your license. Feeding the wheel. The pull-push method, also known as feeding the wheel, is arguably the most important driving test technique. The idea behind it is that it allows you to keep both hands on the wheel at all times, therefore making you a safer driver. But this is bullshit. Feeding the wheel is inefficient, outdated, and in some circumstances, it can be dangerous. Imagine that you're on a country road and you approach a blind corner. You enter what you think is a shallow bend, but as you turn in, the corner starts to decrease in radius. To avoid running wide, you need to add more steering lock quickly but smoothly. Attempt to pull and push the wheel, and you'll end up making jagged inputs at a point where the car is already unstable. You will therefore crash and probably die. So instead, make sure you keep both hands on the wheel and cross your arms to ensure you add steering input progressively, constantly applying the handbrake. The handbrake is your best friend on the UK driving test, and almost every time you stop, you're required to use it. Thankfully, most drivers come to their senses and drop this bad habit once they've passed their test. In reality, there's no need to handbrake every time you come to a halt. If you're in stop-start traffic, for example, the foot brake will usually suffice. And if you need to make an emergency stop in a pile-up situation, the last thing you should do is apply the handbrake, checking your mirrors at predetermined intervals. Every time you pull away in the UK, you should conduct a 6-point check, where you look over your left shoulder, check your left exterior mirror, check your rear view mirror, check the road ahead, check your right mirror, and then finally look over your right shoulder. On your test, you need to make these checks look super obvious to avoid incurring any minor penalties. Our problem with this technique is the fact that it turns situational awareness into a box-ticking exercise, not flashing other road users. The highway code states that
you should only flash your headlights to let other road users know that you are there. Do not flash your headlights to convey any other messages.
As a result, you cannot flash your headlights on your driving test, and you cannot react to someone else flashing their lights at you. This form of communication has the potential to be hazardous, but in most cases, we find it to be very helpful. Flashing people to say thank you or to let them into a line of traffic is a daily occurrence for most of us. And whatever you might have been told, flashing your lights in the UK is not illegal. Speed is your enemy. Controversially, the driving test in the UK fails to incorporate any form of motorway driving. The majority of lessons take place in busy towns or cities where the maximum speed limit will be limited to 30 miles an hour. As a result, young drivers often view speed as the enemy. This isn't a problem on crowded streets, but it can play havoc when it comes to driving on motorways where it's vital that you accelerate to match the speed of fast traffic when merging. Unfortunately, learner drivers and new drivers often get intimidated and slow down on on-ramps, which can cause chaos. Constantly checking your speed. Speeding during your driving test can result in instant failure, and as a result, most learners spend the majority of their assessment staring at the speedo. This is because the test is nothing more than a box-ticking exercise. As long as you're under the limit, you're deemed to be safe. Unfortunately, this is not the case. If you're doing the speed limit but not focusing on the road ahead, this is more dangerous than speeding itself. Thankfully, the more you drive, the more accustomed you become to multitasking. Bonus point: using your indicators if you drive a BMW. If, after passing your driving test, your daddy buys you a sweet BMW, you must drain its indicator fluid immediately and only use the pull and flash function of the indicator stalk as a means to show your displeasure for people in lesser cars. No matter what you learn in your driving test, BMW drivers are not required to indicate.
Now, the next reason for my E36 M3 choice is the noise. Now, the E46 M3 sounds very distinctive. It sounds very metallic, very raspy. It's a bit like someone who's been smoking and who's in desperate need of a cigarette. You know, they're a bit like Is that right? Is that pretty E46 M3-ish?